Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. I am your host, Scott McKay, and we've got a great returning guest for you today and a topic that promises to be a lot of fun. Before we get to that, I want to remind you guys that you can find me on X, on TikTok, on YouTube, and on True Social at Scott McKay. Also on Instagram and Threads at Real Scott McKay. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com. Hope you'll check it out. And gentlemen, as always, the thriving Facebook group is the Mountaintop Summit. Hope you'll join us there for a great conversation. As mentioned, my returning guest is from Toronto, Canada. We have a lot of Canadians on this show. It's pretty cool, actually. And her name is Kim Addis. And today we're going to talk about a topic that, she really discusses a lot. It's one of the centerpieces of her coaching, which is called Frame of Mind coaching, by the way. The topic du jour is The Struggle is Real. Kim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be talking to you. Thank you for having me back.
Well, you're quite welcome. And you also got to be excited to talk about pretty much what is at front and center on your website. This is something you think about a lot, isn't it?
Well, it's not something I think about a lot. It's something I encounter a lot amongst my clients and people who are in the market for coaching. And it's, when we look at it, we look at what is it that let's go back. Okay, let's rewind for a second. So we work with a very specific client base, and those are people who are very highly driven individuals who tend to be achievers. They could be business owners, they could be C-suite level executives, they could be PhDs, people who run labs. Like they're in the top echelon of life's accomplishments. And what we have noticed is that they all tend to struggle in 4 key areas, and it's repetitive. And it doesn't matter what industry, it doesn't matter which function or which job. It could be the president, it could be the chief information officer. It doesn't really matter. But we see these 4 categories of struggle, and they're pretty consistent from person to person across industries and even geographies.
And we're going to talk about all 4 of them, which I'm excited about. We
might as well
kick that off. Yeah. Well, first of all, before we do, the phrase "the struggle is real" is used kind of in jest by a lot of people, isn't it? I mean, just a normal everyday conversation between people interacting socially. They may say, yeah, well, I have this thing going on, or, the kids are acting up, and it's almost like the person agreeing with them. It's saying,
right.
The struggle is real. It's like nowadays the kiddos go based,
Yeah.
The struggle is real. I agree with you. So
exactly. And in this case, what we're really trying to say is you're not the only one in this situation.
Right.
Right?
And it's valid.
It's valid. Exactly. It's valid. You're not the only one. We see this over and over again, and it's repetitive. And it's true. It's a true struggle. Let's not actually overlook this stuff.
Yeah, it's not trivialized in your case. You're building a coaching process and indeed an entire coaching practice around this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so the first pillar of the struggle is isolation. And what springs to mind when I read that word on your website in association with struggle is your high achieving men, guys who are getting after a goal, a financial goal, a career goal. They often sacrifice that quality time with real human beings, especially wife, girlfriend, kids, at the altar of that goal, don't they?
Well, so when we talk about isolation, we think about it a little bit differently. So it's interesting that you identify men.
Well, our audience is 100% men. So
yeah, but you know what? Even the highly driven men who may be in a relationship with a highly driven woman might find that their partners are in a very similar situation. So let's just go with men for a minute. When we think about isolation, in this category, what we're looking at is that they have a huge amount of responsibility. They carry the responsibility on their shoulders, And they feel like at the end of the day, while they might have many people that they can delegate to and people on their team, for them, the buck stops here. But more importantly, they have an image to uphold. And so people look to them for security, for confidence, for guidance, for direction, for leadership, for vision. And when they have self doubt, which they do, when they have self doubt, when they have worries, when they have fears, there is no one they can share it with. And so when we talk about isolation, it's not about the time that they spend with others. And we will talk about that, I promise. But it's more about the fact that they have no one to turn to. And so in this case, they feel isolated with their challenges, isolated with their problems, their worries, their concerns, their fears even. And so they brew in it on their own.
So in other words, people who are so affected in the manner you're talking about may be thinking to themselves in either a real or imagined scenario, I might add, that, hey, the buck stops here. I'm the guy who's got to figure this out. There's no delegating this one to someone else. If it's going to be done right, I got to do it. Whereas this person might, for example, do well to learn the lesson that, hey, if it's done by someone else, it may not be done to my specs, but it may be done perfectly well.
Well,
Is that an example?
Well, so there are multiple examples, but that's one good example where many of these leaders do not. And so you're covering all the subjects all at once. So yes, that's an issue, but it doesn't fall into the isolation category.
Got
It
it.
falls into a different category, and we'll get there. But when we talk about isolation, we talk about this duality of I have a lot of responsibility, I have a lot on my mind, I have a lot going on, and I don't have anyone to share it with because I don't want to look bad and I don't trust people. And so it's that problem we're looking at. It's the feeling of carrying this burden alone. That's what we're really focusing on when we talk about isolation. And so some of these leaders that I've encountered join what's called mastermind groups, where they can meet with their peers on a monthly basis and have a conversation. But on a day to day basis, they're really in it alone. And again, they might have a senior leadership team. They might have, really great people they can count on, but there's only so far they can go. There's only so much they can share. And so they hold it in.
Well, taking everything into consideration that you're talking about, and, I think we're talking about business here, right?
Yeah, we're talking about
Career.
business.
Okay.
Yeah, career.
So someone who is struggling with isolation in context is one of those people who hasn't figured out they need to hire a bunch of people who are smarter than they are and trust them. They feel like they've got to do this all themselves.
But even so, even when they do hire people that are smarter than them, now they experience what? They experience self-doubt. And so there's all kinds of things mixed up in this feeling of isolation. It's responsibility, it's who you're surrounded with, it's who you can trust, it's how you feel about yourself, it's maybe taking on the risk, the brunt of the risk. It's all of these elements all together. And when we look at this concept of isolation, much of it is I don't feel comfortable talking about all the things I want to be talking about or need to be talking about or that I'm thinking about with everybody else. So I need to be very cautious. There's a caution that comes with isolation about who I'm telling what to.
Yeah, everything's top secret. This might get out and then somebody might burn me with whatever information I
Right.
leak.
And that burn can be personal or professional, but there's just this feeling of looking over one's shoulder, and therefore it's best if I just learn to talk a little less. And so I'll hold it in.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing the entire Yellowstone saga. Everybody's watched that show, of course. It seems like that's what's going on with every character in that show all the time.
Well, I haven't seen it, so perhaps you are correct.
Well, that's fair enough, but I think a lot of guys have watched Yellowstone, and one of the big relatable factors of Yellowstone is I know something I can't tell even the people closest to me, and it's not only because the secret might get out or it might get leaked or I can't trust them, but it's just I don't want to disappoint my family members because there's a lot expected of me, and I don't want them to think I'm a bad person because I did this or didn't do that. That's basically the entire theme of the Yellowstone saga, and indeed just about anything Taylor Sheridan touches. It sounds almost like a personal problem. Like he's retelling his own childhood and, the story of his own upbringing in his shows, which may or may not be true. I haven't researched it, but this feeling of isolation being a struggle that's real. I don't think most people like being isolated, and certainly in the context you're talking about it, it sounds like everybody so affected would love to get out from under it. It's not like everybody go away, leave me alone so that I can work in my lab in private, this introverted thing. It's more like, who can I turn to? I don't feel like I have anybody, even if I wanted somebody.
Right. Well, and what you said is very real. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want them to be proud of me. And I can't share all the nitty-gritty, all the drama, all the stuff going on because I don't feel comfortable sharing it. And it shows me potentially as weak. And also they wouldn't understand and they're not interested anyway, and all this kind of stuff, right? So what's left is a person holding a lot by themselves in their hands alone.
So what's the solution? Or do you want to talk about solutions after we get all four of these on the table?
Yeah, let's talk about all four items.
Got
And
it.
then
Okay.
okay, the second one is strained relationships, or what I would call friction. And what we see is actually this is the hottest one, the hottest struggle, because we see these very highly driven leaders who think differently than other people. So their minds work at a faster speed, and they look around them and they say, why aren't people performing? Why don't people care as much? Why aren't we all rowing in the same direction? Like, what's going on here? And what we see is there are two kinds of strain. One is overt, where the leader might get mad, or there's like actual tension, yelling, argument, etc., something tangible. And then there's something much more frequent that we see, which is called covert friction. In this case, the leader sees somebody not performing or sees something that's off and says, I don't have time for this, and never addresses it. And so it continues to grow and festers and gets worse over time. And what we're seeing is leaders who are tolerating people, situations, behaviors, performance that are way under the mark.
One thing that immediately comes to mind is the very true factor that if this is my company, if this is my gig, if this is what I've always dreamed of, it's really hard to expect anybody else to care about it as much as I do.
Right. Correct.
Is that what you're getting at here?
That too. I take the risk and I take the responsibility, and, I hire them and they're paid to do a job, but at the end of the day, it's not their company. And, and so there's a lot of internal kind of strife going on over other people.
And meanwhile, the employee may feel like the employer is demanding absolute loyalty, but that employer may not be loyal to them in the long run either.
That's a good question. I don't know. Sometimes there's definitely a question of loyalty, like who's loyal to whom.
Well, I mean, how could you possibly want to work anywhere else? This is the greatest company and the greatest vision ever conceived. You'd have to be nuts not to want to be here. And meanwhile, the person's already on Indeed.com trying to find something that pays them $25 an hour instead of $22 an hour. I mean, that's the extent of it for the employee.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at these leaders and see where their friction lies, I mean, that could be the case, but it's often, I have someone who's working here, they're not performing up to speed. I've tried to address it a couple of ways. I don't know how to address it anymore. I'm tolerating something I shouldn't be tolerating. Right now it's like I've swept it under the carpet. The carpet now has a huge mound, and I feel like I'm tripping over it or avoiding it. And it's like this, there's an elephant in the room.
Yeah, in that case, that person would just not be the right person in the right seat on the right bus, or else they weren't trained correctly or something like that. There's a deficiency in the employee performance.
But there's an issue. And what we see is leaders often are frustrated with others. And that's what we see. There's a struggle, and it's a common struggle. It could be they're frustrated with their partners. It could be in family-owned businesses. They're frustrated with their siblings or their dad, or the dad is frustrated with their kids. We see this just a frustration with other humans and how other humans operate, how other humans think, how other humans show up, what they expect, what they don't expect, and on and on and on. And so there's these leaders have struggle with other people, and it's a common problem.
So I can only imagine that exacerbates the isolation issue.
Yes, exactly that. Exactly.
Okay.
And they're all really connected. But so that's struggle number 2. Struggle number 3 is what I call chronic dissatisfaction. You alluded to this earlier, but what is chronic dissatisfaction? It's a feeling like they're not moving fast enough. They're not getting to where they want to go. They don't understand what's taking so long or who's to blame. Is it them? Are they a poor leader? Is it their team? Are they surrounded by idiots? Like, what is it that's going on here? Why is this so hard? And while they are all high achievers, their achievements don't leave them happy very long. And so they're always moving on to the next thing. And they say, yes, that's good. But now what's ahead? Yeah, they're happy for 5 minutes. I remember speaking at an event, and I brought up the issue of chronic dissatisfaction. And one person put up his hand. He said, I can never be happy. And I see that all the time. There's this constant underlying like discomfort with where they are in life and how far they've come and so on. And so they're either pointing the finger outside of themselves saying, somebody out there is to blame, and more than likely they are pointing the finger at themselves and saying something's wrong with me. I'm falling short. I'm an imposter. I don't even know how I got here, and on and on and on.
I remember reading about how either Commodore Vanderbilt or Rockefeller, one of those richest men in the world types about 100, 120 years ago, was asked, dude, how much, I probably didn't say dude, but hey man, how much money is going to be enough? And the answer was just a little bit more.
There you go. Yeah.
And it's become an iconic exchange over the years because anybody who's really a driven type A kind of guy, or gal for that matter, can relate to that. A little ain't enough. Too much isn't enough. It'll never, ever, ever be enough. I'm not enough. I think a lot of that comes from our upbringing, doesn't it? Parents have this baby Jesus mentality towards their kid as if they can do no wrong. And if anything happens that's less than perfect, man, we got to rush them off to a child psychologist and fix this immediately. But if you do get straight A's or you do win the championship for the basketball team or whatever, well, you know what? That's what was expected. You did your job. Let's do the next thing. It's, kind of like the movie Whiplash with J.K. Simmons being a very abusive teacher because he demands the best out of people who are trying to be legends. So nothing's ever good enough, but he's just killing his students' psychological well-being in the process. I mean, that's an understatement. He's bludgeoning it with a cudgel is what he's doing. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially men, can relate to that movie too, especially if we're oldest or only children in birth order and our parents kind of impose that you are meant to do great things and we will accept nothing less mentality imposed upon them.
I will say to you that I have worked with many, many men who have had troubled upbringings. Their parents may have been absent. Their parents may have been abusive. Their parents may have been very religious and strict and created a very restrictive upbringing and environment and on and on. And it definitely leaves a mark. It definitely leaves a mark. And at the same time, I've worked with individuals who have had perfectly lovely childhoods and upbringings, and they still have, let's call it, a voice inside of their heads that is there chronically beating themselves up. And so, yes, upbringing plays a big role, but it's human nature, right? We all have a voice inside our heads, and that voice will determine how we feel about everything. And very often that voice is very punishing.
Yeah, I guess you got your people who are extremely driven and nothing will ever be enough. You got people who are total slackers and they're happy to sit on their mommy's couch at age 35 and play video games and eat Cheetos, and you have everybody else in between.
Well, you do have a wide range of people. We tend to work with the highly driven population, but indeed they all have struggles. But let me share with you what the fourth struggle is. The fourth struggle is, it's a term that I invented. It's called slippage. What is slippage? It's when these highly driven individuals are so busy working, so hard at work. They come home and their minds are still at work, and they let very important things slip through the cracks. It could be time with their family. And very often what we see is they're not sleeping very well. They're not eating very well. They're binging on Netflix while they're on their computers at the same time. They're just not able to be present, and they're not really taking very good care of themselves, right? They're just not being able to take care at a high level of their overall well-being, mentally, physically, spiritually. We see a lot of anxiety, we see a lot of anger, we see a lot of frustration, and so there's a great deal of slippage that's going on.
In other words, basically mismanaged energy.
Mismanaged energy, yes. And mismanaged, my job is to help people manage the way they think, and they're not doing a great job of thinking in a way that allows them to easily achieve their goals.
Now, I have to admit to you, I didn't see that coming under the heading of slippage. I was thinking more like how an aging rock star would feel. I'm past my prime. I've done my best work. Like Hank Moody in Californication. I'm a best-selling author, but I haven't written anything worth reading in 10 years, and I'm starting to feel a little pressure because I feel like my talent has slipped, my motivation has slipped, maybe my brain power has slipped. Does that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, I see sometimes motivation slips for sure. And sometimes people feel like they've lost their mojo.
Exactly.
Exactly that. I feel like I've lost my mojo. I feel like I'm, just kind of doing the motions and not really loving it anymore how I used to. But more than anything, more often than not, what we see is that slippage is these people are burning the candle at both ends, trying super hard to achieve their goals. And usually those goals are tangible outside goals, and they're miserable on the inside. And so the way that they cope with that feeling of miserability is to dull the emotion. Miserability by dulling the emotion. Oh, yeah. And they dull the emotions. How do they do that? They might overeat. They might drink. They might, indulge in some weed, whatever it is. But they're zoning out for a bit because the emotions and the inputs are overwhelming. Like think about it. We're getting inputs from every direction. Right? What's happening on email, what's happening on social media, what's happening on television, what's happening with our kids, what's happening at work, what's happening with our spouses. Like it's all coming at us. And we only have a certain amount of capacity. And so what do? We zone out.
That's the urgent versus important argument, isn't it?
Well, it's the urgent versus important argument, but it's also I'm allowing life to take over. I'm allowing the things in my environment, the things that are outside of me, to kind of step in and take over my life. And I can't not pay attention to these things. I can't get out of this trap.
Yeah, the urgent versus important thing. I got a bunch of things demanding time of me that aren't priorities, and I get trapped into that. Yeah. The term miserability sounds like one of Rich Hall's sniglets from about 25 years ago, doesn't it? Like, I have the ability, but I'm miserable doing what I'm best at. Is it time for a new life challenge, or has my purpose changed and it hasn't hit me yet? What's going on there?
Yeah. But we do definitely see people who are, we call it being in the rat race. And they're stuck there and they have no idea how to remove themselves from that equation without feeling like, hey, if I make a decision to take a step back, that means I'm failing. And so they're trapped in this paradigm where they have to keep going. And it's like being on a treadmill leading nowhere.
Yeah. Rough.
Yeah.
Tying this all back to the core purpose of this show, which is helping men get better with their relationships with women as they become better men. Obviously, we're not at our best if we're struggling in any of these four areas you're talking about. But I think a lot of guys, the low-hanging fruit here, for a lot of guys is I'm so caught up in my work and what I have to do to put food on the table and my purpose that I bring these struggles home with me from work and so affect my family with them. Or it's affecting my dating life because I can't decompress when I go out and meet a woman. It just feels like wasted time to be on a date. And these guys start telling themselves, ain't nobody got time to go out and meet a great woman, develop a relationship. That seems so trivial in the year 2025 compared to me having to keep my nose to the grindstone and do this work. And it's not only men nowadays who are so affected. We have this Hofstadtian cultural mindset in the United States to this day where women want to be the ones who bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan, or else they don't feel like they have any self-worth vis-a-vis being a woman, because we live in this masculinized society, et cetera, and everybody gets brainwashed into thinking my duty is at work and in my career, and anything involving personal relationship or parenthood, for that matter, is got to be a second-rate goal.
They definitely prioritize their careers. Absolutely seeing that. And when we look at dating, what we see is a lot of churn, right? So men are dating many women and they're not finding what they're looking for because they're really not giving it a lot of time, and they don't have the attention span, and they don't have the patience, and they don't have the bandwidth, and they're finding all the reasons why this isn't the perfect person, but they're good for now. And so there's like a lot of quick fixes, right? There's a lot of this reaching for something that feels good right now. And so there's lots of, short-term flings, these things going on just to fill the instant, immediate need. Again, whether it's a relationship that's for fun, whether it's a bottle of wine, whether it's, going out for whiskey and cigars with the boys, whatever it is, it's this, I need a quick fix. Let me go do that. It's a good release, and it allows me to carry on.
Well, that, and there's a societal meme that's been going on for decades now, maybe to some degree since the dawn of recorded time, where men equate fatherhood with a paycheck.
Yeah.
That's whether I'm enough or not. And that is very isolating. That does strain relationships. It's never going to be enough, right?
Yeah.
It kind of checks all the boxes here.
It's like watching Mad Men all over again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Except in real life, you see billionaires, right, who have no such problem as we're discussing here, delegating the work to others, trusting that the work will get done, focusing on their families, having time to play around and even accept other major challenges in life, even when there's this multi-billion-dollar business going on. Obviously, Donald Trump made time to be president, and his Trump organization is still there, and his family's still running it, and ostensibly seems like he gets along with his family. Elon Musk is now taking on a role in government, and he keeps opening up new businesses, and he's launching into space, and he's the head of Tesla, and at the same time, he's playing around on Twitter half the day. Where does this guy get the time for that? It seems like the more successful people are, the more they figured out how to get out from under the struggles you're talking about. So the struggle is real, but the solution is valid.
Well, so people like Trump and people like the Tesla guy.
Richard Branson, another example. It goes on and on.
Great idea, yeah. So these people have a different way of thinking about everything. And one of the things that I do with my clients is I look at how these people think. What are their thinking strategies? And how can we apply their thinking strategies to make our lives easier, more successful, have greater impact? All of that. What's the difference between the way Richard Branson thinks and the way you think, or the way I think, or the way any typical person thinks? Richard Branson has a very different mental approach for solving problems. Richard Branson looks at things and sees opportunities. We look at problems, we're like, oh no. He looks at problems, he says, wait a minute, right? So he approaches things very differently. And so the question becomes, how can we learn how they think, and how can we incorporate how they think into our own businesses and lives?
Well, first of all, they're obviously not micromanaging everything, but do tell, how do they think?
Well, what I have seen is that they typically have 3 specific thinking strategies that they apply that is rather different than the norm. So number 1 is they're always challenging conventional beliefs, and specifically even their own beliefs. So they're always asking a question. Okay, when I see this problem, this situation, this area of frustration, what do I believe to be true about it, and what is actually true? So I'll give you a perfect example. They might say, or anybody might say, I can't start a business. It requires too much money, and I don't have that kind of money. Someone like Richard Branson says, yeah, okay, it requires money, but there's no reason I can't go get it, right? There's lots of money out there. The second thing we see is that they think about resources very differently. So again, using the same example, well, I need $100,000 to start a business. There's no way I'm going to get $100,000. Someone like Richard Branson, even before he was very wealthy and very successful, said, I know that in this world there is money. I know that there are resources out there. There is no shortage of money. There is no shortage of any resource I'm looking for. No shortage of talent, no shortage of time. And it's just a matter of me accessing it. And there's no reason why I am not entitled to it. I'm going to go find it. So they think about it differently. They don't think that something's not possible. They think, how can it be possible? They approach it differently. And number three is people like Richard Branson are very, very focused on what they want. They have a vision and they stick to that vision. They go after that vision. They don't get distracted. They focus on what they want. Now, I will tell you, if you put like 100 men in a room and you ask them one simple question, what do you really, really want? More than half of them won't be able to answer that question with ease.
They're aiming at nothing and hitting it every time.
Right. And so when you're not clear about what you want, it's hard to get it, isn't it?
For sure.
And so go ahead and ask Donald Trump what he wants. He's pretty clear. He knows what he wants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think also a lot of men are feeling beaten down because they have the opposite approach of what you were describing Richard Branson is having, which is instead of saying, I can do this and the resources are all there and having this abundance mentality, they let themselves get beaten down. You can hear it in men's voices. They sound like, well, the way I always put it is they sound like Eeyore instead of Tigger.
Yeah.
From Winnie the Pooh. It's like, yeah, well, I'm just going to fail again. This woman's just going to reject me like the rest of them. Meanwhile, the guys who succeed are looking at the entire world through an optimistic lens. Yes. Perhaps not a Pollyanna-ish, unreasonably optimistic lens, but nevertheless, they're thinking, I have to find a way to do this. That's my goal, not, hey, I'm never going to be able to accomplish this. Let's give it up. And this, talk about slippage. This is more like leakage. It leaks down into their interpersonal relationships, their success with women. And women are looking at this guy going, I'm not going to hitch my wagon to this because this guy's pessimistic. He doesn't make me feel safe and comfortable. He can't lead. He can't provide. He can't protect because he just has already assumed everything's going to fail. And then it becomes this vortex of doom whereby the guy isn't getting dates, isn't attracting women, and he gets angry because, why won't these bitches sleep with me? Well, the problem, the struggle is his own creation.
Yes.
Right.
And it's the vibe and the energy they carry forth, right?
What's the solution, Kim? Tell us.
Well, okay, my simple solution is you need help with your thinking. My simple solution is the way you see the world is the way you live your life. And the way you see the world isn't getting you what you want to achieve or what you want to experience. Therefore, like the change that needs to happen has to start with you. So the question is, how do you make that happen? Of course, what we do is we help people with that problem through coaching. But,
fantastic.
When you're not achieving the results that you want to be achieving, the question you have to ask yourself is, how am I thinking? What do I believe to be true? How are my beliefs impacting everything I do, hear, smell, taste, and touch? And how do these beliefs line up with the goals that I have?
I think bringing this full circle, the bottom line here is if you don't even know what you freaking want, how can you have a plan to go get it? And if you're running on this proverbial hamster wheel trying to achieve and you don't even know where you're going, you really are on a hamster wheel. You're going nowhere. I think the work you're doing is great and I applaud it. And I'm so glad you're out there making a difference, Kim. And I want to send these guys to your website, which is frameofmindcoaching.com, of course. But if you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/struggle, hey, let's just make it struggle, because after all, the struggle is real. The website's real. Let's point them there. mountaintoppodcast.com/struggle. Kim, what are the guys going to find when they get there?
They're going to find all kinds of things. They're going to find our coaching programs. They're going to find my historical podcasts. They're going to find blogs. They're going to find an opportunity to have a complimentary coaching call with me. And they're just going to be able to learn, mostly actually. They're going to learn about the experiences of our past clients and how happy they were with their experience in coaching and how their lives were changed as a result.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you came back on the show. And I think, even though this particular discussion started off being mostly about businessmen, et cetera, and guys were probably scratching their head going, why are we going there? I do think we brought it around in a way that guys are going to relate to, because this mindset you're talking about and the need to get out from under the struggle translates to every aspect of our life. And when I don't know if defeating the struggle really ever happens, but certainly overcoming the struggle and managing it makes us better men. And when we're better men, then we realize, hey, you know what? I need to stop, smell the roses, have a little more balance in my life, which I think you're probably ultimately talking about. And then there will be time for some things I really want to do that make my life better instead of just running on a hamster wheel because someone told me I had to. And I think that's where the action is for a lot of guys in this conversation. And I'm so glad you brought it to our attention, because I think we need to hear it.
I think that if people want to reach their goals, whatever they are, whether they're relationship goals, personal goals, or whatever, they really have to look inside of themselves and ask, like, how am I approaching this? And is that approach really actually aligned with the desires and the goals that I have? And what we find is that oftentimes the way we think about something is diametrically opposed to the very thing we want.
How about
And
that?
so that's my message for today. If you want something, take a look inside and ask yourself if your thinking is allowing you to get there.
Assuming we know what we really want, right?
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. Again, great show. Thank you so much for being on, Kim.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll have you back on soon. And gentlemen, go to mountaintoppodcast.com, visit our 3 sponsors, Origin in Maine, that's Jocko Willink's company, herosoap.com, and also the Keyport. And when you get anything from our 3 longtime sponsors, please use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get another 10% off. Gentlemen, there's a free book for you at mountaintoppodcast.com called Sticking Points Solved. Just about every area of, struggle with women that guys come to me with is covered in that book. I answer at least one email on each one of the most common struggles guys face when getting better with women. That book is yours for free when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com. There's a lot more for you there as well, including getting caught up with the master classes and getting on my calendar to talk to me for free for 25 minutes about what's going on in your life and maybe putting a plan of action together to help you get better with women. All of that is there for you and so much more when you go visit mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.